All right, thanks everyone for coming. I think this is the fourth roundtable we've had in the past 3 or 4 months. This is probably the smallest group we've had, and we've done that on purpose. We only sold about 24 tickets and limited it at that because we want these events to be as intimate as possible and sort of encourage as many questions as possible. And I've found the larger the crowd, the less questions. The smaller the crowd and more intimate it is, the more likely people are to ask questions that they want answered. So that's the reason why we're quite a bit smaller than we were last time. The topic tonight is sort of reversal of what the last one was. So we're talking about what agencies actually want from clients in terms of social media. And again, we have 3 of the best client minds in the country. We've got Paul Barwell here from Holla. Did I say client?
You do. Agency minds.
Agency
You're
minds.
never going to recover from that.
It's been a long day. Mr. Luke Atkinson from Leo's and Mr. Ash Ringrose from Soap. The first question I just wanted to ask all 3 of you, and we'll start from all the way down, was if you could give some sort of rating from 1 to 10 in terms of how educated you think the client-side market is in social media, and how we as agencies, or agencies in general in Australia, can collectively raise that, I guess, social media IQ that we have across clients.
All right, across clients, I suppose people are not necessarily confident, but inquisitive. I think there's a raising of the stakes in social, and people are paying more attention due to the sheer volume of people that are starting to interact with social.
Yep.
And I think there is a genuine inquisition, but a tentativeness as well, because it's quite a difficult space to wrap your head around. So I don't envy clients that have to start to get into the mindset of their consumers, because social is a responsive, reactive space. So you actually have to have a really, really intimate understanding of who you're trying to connect with and what your brand means to them from an identity perspective. So, moving away from just broadcast to response and iterative campaign development programs and all that kind of stuff is actually really, really difficult. So I'd say that the skill set's probably not great at the moment, but there's definitely a palpable sense of inquisition and wanting to better understand that space. And it is playing a much larger part. We all work on international brands, and it's sort of flowing from the top down as well, is that there's an agenda from global saying this is actually a space that we can amass an audience. And there's some real, from a global perspective, real cost saving that you can make once you actually tap into people's behaviours and who they want to be and how our brand can help them fuel their identity. We are a small market, so it's not a huge part of the moment, but it's getting better. So at the moment, skill set, not necessarily. The people being inquisitive, definitely.
So the appetite to move is there.
I suppose it's just dipping your feet in. I find a lot of marketers are not in the space themselves.
Yes.
Which would help them keep up the pace of change, just actually getting in there.
That makes sense.
Number?
A number? A number? Our clients are phenomenal, like Ashley. Our clients are
there we go.
On the scale of industry standards, our clients are under 10. No, look, I'd say the number in Australia, and that's having international experience as well. I'd probably say 5, and that's predominantly inhibited by just not being in the spaces themselves and not being competent or confident enough to actually just dive in and create their own product.
So when you say that, when you talk about them being in the space themselves, are you talking about senior level executives not actually using Facebook themselves, therefore not having an understanding of actually how it works?
I think it helps. If you're going to drive a car, you've got to get behind the wheel.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have a much different appreciation for the skills involved in driving a car, and obviously driving a car starts to become subconscious, and so is social media. So you start to see your news feed or the different feeds peppered with all these different sources, and you start to take an appreciation of how fragmented the landscape is once you're there, and the different, I suppose, intricacies of what different social media perhaps bring to different audiences, like Pinterest and Instagram, facilitating creativity or just keeping up to date. And unless you're there, I don't think you necessarily have that appreciation for pace of change, but also the volume and the importance that those channels play in people's lives as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. Mr. Atkinson.
All right, so
Keep it to 20 minutes or less.
okay, 20 minutes or less. Thanks, mate. Maybe I'll get to a number last as well. I think there's a question about education about what within social media, I think, and that's a key question for me. So, for example, at Burnett's, we make TV ads for our clients. Now, we don't expect our clients to be well versed in all of the details about the production of how you make a TV ad. That's why we have a production department. Well, frankly, that's why we exist and we get paid money, and it kind of keeps us in gainful employment, right? So we don't expect our clients to know about the intricacies of those things, but we do expect them to understand and be able to approve and make significant decisions about the content and the choices and the messages that go on within those relative to a grander, I guess, strategic intent and belief about what we expect that piece of communication to deliver.
Yeah.
And so in that respect, do I think it's necessary for clients to be well versed, especially more senior clients, to your earlier question, in detail about the intricacies of what and how social media works and all the platforms? No, I don't really think that they do need to. In fact, I would much rather them focus their efforts on understanding what they believe social media's role within their total marketing mix is and what it's going to deliver for their business. Because I think if they and we are respectively clear on that topic, then it becomes much easier to make clear decisions about what we're trying to do and what kind of platforms we're going to use. And then it's up to us as an agency, industry, or agencies specifically, to then educate our clients as to, all right, well then what are the tactical decisions that we're going to make about which particular platforms we're going to use and what do we think they're going to deliver and what are the levers that we're going to pull and the funky things that we're going to do in those places. The C-suite guys, they don't need to know that stuff. I'm a head of planning, I don't need to know that stuff, but I do need to know that stuff about what do I expect it to deliver commercially, and then thus how am I going to use it and what are the big decisions that I need to be smart about making that's going to drive that growth. So overall, it's probably, less than a 5 in terms of the nuts and bolts of how it works across the board, but I'm not sure whether that matters too much. I would, and sadly, it's probably it might even be lower than that in terms of what we expect it to deliver, what clients expect it to do for their businesses, as opposed to, well, it's there and we just need to be there if we're going to have a vague hope of being contemporary, which is often, sadly, the driver. So that's where I'd like to see the education, and that getting raised up to an 8 or a 9, like they are in all the other channels they're spending cash on.
So it's primarily about getting sort of alignment across agency and client in terms of what role social is going to play within the overall marketing mix, and then getting down into a more granular level in terms of technical execution. The C-level guys don't really need to know too much about that.
You don't need to know that, no.
They just need to be aligned on what role social is going to provide.
That's right, and thus how much money we should be expecting to spend against it, and what kind. And that's not necessarily just the budget you give to the agency, but also the budget that you're putting behind the people resource that goes into the whole kit caboodle, rather than it just being, oh, well, it's there and it's kind of probably got some role, but I'm not quite sure what it is, and we need to be there, so I'll just kind of put minimal investment against it and, see what happens.
Yeah.
Type of mentality.
Great.
I would actually be afraid if all of our clients had a 10 level, because we wouldn't be able to pull anything over their eyes. And in terms of a number, I would love for them to be a 10, just knowing how digital works, digital being a subset of that, and I'd even like them to be a 10 in how to actually look after a brand, or even look after advertising. So it all.
Actually, no. Then I'm not required.
But the more savvy they are about brand, then they realise where digital plays a role. Then they realise where social plays a role within that. If they're not even a good brand manager, and this is just in general, it's all going to filter down to the numbers are going to get lower and lower. So they might know everything about social, but have no idea about how to do brands. So it's like, they could be on Pinterest, they could be on Facebook and say, I love all this, but they have no idea why they should be there, because they don't even know about how to look after a brand. So in terms of technically answering your question, I'd say 5's a
Yeah.
a good mix. There's a few. I mean, the younger they are, the more involved they are in terms of their the amount of attention social gets. It gets a 9 or a 10 sometimes, and I feel it doesn't deserve a 9 or a 10.
Yeah, is that just because it's the new shiny kid on the block?
Yeah, it gets way more attention than that. So, you know, if you said to a client, do you want 1 million Facebook fans or 1 million emails on a database? And they'll be like, oh, obviously all the attention's on Facebook fans. Whereas some, you know, that decision is a very, you know, that's a very important decision. So
Yeah.
all the focus is going on social when it should be, you know, talking about how does that fit within. But it is, I would rather than, I'd like for them to just be better in digital all round.
Yeah.
And have better brand managers all round. And then I don't care if they don't know it technically.
Yeah.
What level of trust? If they don't know it, then they just need to raise their trust level with us.
Yeah.
That we're doing the right job. So it can be a 2, but they trust us a 10, and you have to build that trust, and that's tougher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just on that is a caveat that I was going to ask you a question, and it's something that I think that comes up again and again for me at least, and I think for you guys as well, and anyone else working within social and client land, is you may propose like a really amazing application idea on Facebook that's going to do amazing things, but you know, you believe that it's going to work yourself, you can see how the mechanic's going to operate, and you can see the results that you're going to get from it. But client will ask a question that is often, you know, proposed like, show me proof or show me case studies and how this has worked in the past. And often because this space is so new and the ideas we put forward have not actually been done before, because the space moves so quickly and the options available to us become, like we get new options available to us again and again all the time because the space evolves so fast. How do you guys build sort of confidence in your clients without evidence when you're presenting new ideas and concepts?
They always love KPI spreadsheets.
Yeah.
And I hate them because a lot of it's, you know, you're trying to justify this whole idea down to like what metric number.
Yeah.
But that does help. You ask them to trust you. If that's first dealing with a client, that's going to be tough. Hopefully you've built up trust over the years.
Yeah.
You basically have some like jewel in there to try and, you know, do some Jedi mind trick to kind of convince them, you know, this is a great idea. And for me, and this is for everyone, like, it doesn't matter how good your idea is, if you can't sell that idea, your idea is useless. So I would just make sure you have really good accounts people, good creatives that are good at selling the idea. You have to sell it to them like you're trying to sell anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess you just have a good sales job or ask them to trust you, which helps with your good sales.
A lot of times it's starting at the thin end of the wedge, like shit. Don't bet big on something that potentially lose big. You know, trust is accumulative with clients, with consumers alike. Like, you know, it's there's some great stuff that you can do just through mechanics and changing the way that you think about the way that people interact with a certain part. But either way, I suppose trying to get trust is about getting easy wins first, and then actually establishing the worth, the value. And you said, you know, what role does social media play in the larger part of the brand mix? Demonstrating that it can actually produce results, and that it's fulfilling the overall and overarching brand requirements, and then going from there and actually, you know, doing more out there, left of field, innovative work. And you know, that was one of the things that I actually penned down is I find clients are a little too conformist in Australia. I remember one campaign on Facebook where they actually completely disregarded the rules of how Facebook is supposed to be used from an advertiser perspective. It was like Goal, South American airline, and they've used the organic news feed as an entry mechanic into one of their campaigns. And it's like, you know what, the company said, we know what Facebook requires of us, but fuck you, we're going to do whatever we want.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see a little bit more of that sort of pushing.
How did that go? Did they get banned?
It was phenomenal. They had something like, cause what it was Valentine's Day campaign, but they had something like 3 million media impressions just from people refreshing a page, because it was the image that was going to pop up at a certain time on their news feed, and so they just refresh, waiting for this to pop up, and then you had to comment in the comments section, and that was the entry mechanic. They just completely disregarded what Facebook says, and I think a lot of people pay too much attention to what Facebook says, and actually just
I hear a lot of like, it's illegal to do that. It's Facebook.
What is Facebook going to do? Is Mark Zuckerberg going to come and give you a spanking?
Ask for forgiveness rather than permission on a lot of stuff. But I like the idea of the thing where it's like, the good thing about social and digital is you can, not everything because some ideas are quite large, but do a vertical slice or start small and plan for success. So here we're gonna test it with this little audience and this spend. If it goes well, then let's double down, triple down on it. You don't. The good thing about digital is you don't need we need to go to Buenos Aires and we need 200 people to shoot this ad.
Yeah.
And Michael Bay's free this weekend. You can go small and then say this test case worked. Now can you give us 2-3 times the budget and we'll go large.
Yeah.
And that's probably the best way to do it. You can build trust that way. It's like the minimal investment level is a lot lower.
Yeah. But this isn't, with the risk of sounding like the ad guy, this isn't a new conversation.
No.
Like, basically, fundamentally, anything that's creative is i.e. original, and thus it hasn't been done before. So it might be in a channel that you've used before, a la TV, right? But if it's really, really good, well then it's probably something that's fairly radical and different. And so therefore, it has a bunch of risk associated with it. Now, whether that risk is a message or doing something that feels, scary, or whether it's a new piece of technology, basically the same old rules apply, I think, from an agency point of view, in terms of helping clients understand what that risk is, and then finding ways to then overcome that. And that's the role of a good strategist, the Jedi mind tricks, to get that sold in. But I think also it's about that smart use of staying in beta and trickling things out. You can do that. To your earlier point, if you're going to go and drop $1 million on a TV production, it's a big bet, right? That's a big bet. Versus, let's go and spend 50, 100, see how it works, and then propagate it outwards. So, it's the same old rules.
Yeah, great. Jill, you wanted to talk about, I guess, consumers, or consumers sort of underestimating or having an indifference with brands, and sort of actually stating that people do actually give a shit about the brand or brands that they follow on Facebook.
Yeah.
Versus ones they don't, because I know it's a misconception that a lot of people believe they just don't give a shit and just follow it for a free coupon or something. But
Where's the free coupon?
Well, actually, my argument would be that consumers don't give a shit at all, and we've got to work really, really, really hard for their attention. If you look,
It depends on the brand, though.
I think they're a love brand.
Football teams and stuff like that.
For the vast majority, it's like we do work for, let's say, Random House. People just love the shit out of books, and they're weird. Like there's some weird people out there, and there are these high interest brands. But for the most part, the way I contextualize it is even then, like as a marketer and as an advertiser, that you work on a piece of business 10 hours a day, and you've got a vested interest in its success. So you're sort of tying your own interest levels emotionally to the fact that you think that other people care. And I think that if we actually started off, and irrespective of whether you got a love brand or not, if we started off from point zero and go, no one gives a crap about what we're saying, we would be a lot more creative in the way that we actually execute, in the way we try to be integrated into someone's identity or identifying their behaviour and how that. So,
but if you go through that phase, you go, no one cares about our brand. What I'm saying, and you can't find any reason, then don't be in social for certain brands. Like, we've got Q-tips or something like.
But it doesn't
no one
mean
cares. So do we really need that big?
But I think you made this point. Banks can still be funny and interesting. It's just like, all right, so we don't play any role in regards to and then it should be just awareness and getting out and understanding people's tensions and their concerns and what entertains them and whatever else. So that's what you identify.
Banks and money are still very high interest. Money is a very high interest thing that banks control.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about more like maybe Band-Aids are wrong, like earbuds or Q-tips or.
But there's always
nail polish remover brand. Like there's certain things
that would be high interest. I reckon you could make that.
You could probably make it high interest, but again, you're talking fashion there. But you need to find what's the brand, what is interesting for that consumer, for that brand. If there isn't any, then you have to say, like, should we be in that space?
Brands need a good human purpose, a real human purpose. What do they do for people? You know, that adds, you know, beyond just, you know, I clear the, you know, fragments of wax out of the opening of your ear hole type of, you know, like. Yeah. But you're not. No.
Nothing small.
If only I followed them on Facebook.
I know.
Yeah, if you and thus you need a purpose, right? And if you don't have a really, really strong purpose, and you're not living and breathing that in the social environment, well then you're probably on borrowed time, because probably the reason why they liked you on Facebook in the first place was because of that purpose, and then you're just milking them, really. And I agree, like there's a lot of milking that's done, you know, on social media. Hey, you like my brand, so I'm just going to jam stuff down your throat about how awesome my product is, and actually, you know what, I wasn't really that interested and excited, and you tune out.
I suppose the point that I was trying to make there was don't underestimate people's indifference to your brands.
Yeah.
And if you don't underestimate it, if you don't feel that you're worthy of an audience, I think that would just be good for everybody, because what would start to happen is our jobs would become easier, and by clients giving us better briefs and actually saying, well, no one gives a shit that we've just added oxygenated pea shooter to our repertoire of products. And they would actually say, look, we know no one gives a shit about this, but we've got to find an audience, and we want you to find that audience in an engaging, interesting way that's going to be fueled socially. Because I think that, you know, social isn't necessarily a media, it's a phenomenon. And it's something that we should look at, right? Everything.
That's a quote right there.
Well, yeah, everything should be social. So, you know, if you're thinking about TV used to be social because that's where everybody used to eat their dinner, and that's what the conversations they had around the living room and whatever else. So you were forced to watch TV advertising. But now you're not necessarily. You can record and skip, and you can download Game of Thrones and whatever else. But it still doesn't negate the fact that advertising and communications need to have some sort of social hook, so people feel compelled to either attach themselves, i.e. they go to the shops and buy the thing, share or whatever else. So, you know, I just think it would lift the game a bit if we didn't feel privileged, or we didn't feel as though we had a guaranteed audience there. And you know, you can buy media on Facebook. Doesn't mean we should be buying media on Facebook. It doesn't mean we should be messaging people on Facebook. It's like, you know, I don't know, it's just think that we've lost the focus on communication should have value.
We're, you know, again, it's an advertising maximum. We're an uninvited guest in people's lives. You know, if you're an uninvited guest when you turn up at someone's house, you're at pains to be nice to them, to engender their.
Would you say the same in social though? If in order to gain a fan, you have to implicitly get someone to actively like your page and go through the action of opening the door, say, into your house.
Yeah.
So that they can then, without effectively open the door and come in and are willing to receive a message from you. Would you say that?
People don't have to turn on the TV, right?
Yeah.
It's still in the house though.
Still in the house.
I think
I'm lost in this analogy.
No, the thing was,
what's the house about?
I guess the broadcast messaging like we've had in radio, TV and print has always been disruptive. Like we've always had it shoved in our face. Whereas on, say, a platform like Facebook, in order to become a fan of a brand or a page, you have to actually go through the process of liking it and implicitly saying that I want to follow you and I want to receive information from you. So,
well, not with paid media. Like my boss was saying the other day, he was really pissed off because he was watching this ad on TV, and then he jumped onto his smartphone, and they were clever enough from a media perspective to buy exactly the same space on Facebook, right? You had a thumbnail then appear in his news feed, which was for the ad that he was actually trying to avoid on TV. Ironic, but no, I think that we've taken advantage of the fact that people haven't been distracted for so long. Maybe they have been distracted. Maybe we've just assumed that they haven't been distracted.
Yeah, but how, you know, I think that's an interesting discussion point though. Like how much has someone really invited you in by hitting like?
So adding a new button, really like.
Really,
so I
really
like it, but I
yeah.
really like it.
You're a bestie.
Yeah. It took 3 clicks to get.
We are now in a relationship. It's complicated, but we're in a relationship.
I like nail polish.
No, that makes sense. Luke, in terms of, you've written here in terms of a point, you want clients to think about their audiences differently. Social is not about individuals and consumption of products, it's about networks of people and consumption and relevantly sharing relevant.
That was a hastily written point that you're now reading out in public. Yeah, exactly.
Do you want to reword
Yeah,
that?
shall I expand on the point? I think traditionally in the world of communications, we tend to think of the people that we're talking to as consumers, right? We always talk to them as consumers, and why we call them consumers is because we're thinking about them relative to how we're going to get them to consume our product. And of course, that should probably be the ultimate goal of really anything that we're doing in social, if it's going to deliver the commercial return that I was talking about earlier. But we're probably at least a step removed away from that behaviour. And so really then you've got to have a think about what are you doing in social and how are you leveraging the connection that people have with each other in that kind of infrastructure, i.e. the fact that they're socialised and they're able to connect with other people. They're basically existing in networks. How are you going to think about them as regards to living within a network and leveraging the idea that they're going to talk to each other about things based on the principle that actually word of mouth is really one of the key influences behind actually generally most brands' effectiveness. So there was a study that I like to quote quite frequently, which was not a study into social media, but it was actually more of a study into how creativity is effective. And so really it was done by the IPA in the UK, and they cross-referenced the campaigns that had won creative awards and the campaigns that had also won effectiveness awards, and they were looking for what's the relationship between the two. And the first point is that creative awards were much more likely to have won effectiveness awards first up. So why is that the case? And the key driver of the effectiveness of creativity is basically generating buzz, talkability, right? And that's i.e. a network effect, right? People talking to other people about how awesome they thought that Cadbury Gorilla ad was. So there's a huge amount of potential effectiveness that we can unlock rather, by tapping into that idea of understanding people as a network, and i.e. understanding that idea of sharing behaviours and what are the insights that we can unlock that drives a sharing behaviour within the network. And that's a different insight to what gets me to want to choose Heineken over Corona. That's a different insight than why I might want to talk about Heineken or something that Heineken has done to my buddies. And so if we can start to rethink about our audience as a network of people and start to understand the insights that are going to unlock that conversational behaviour, that word of mouth as opposed to just a consumption behaviour, then arguably there's a dearth of effectiveness for us to go after. So yeah, that's basically.
You said all that without using the word viral.
Oh, thank you.
We should have had a whiteboard with banned words.
Yeah. I think that's, when I read that quote, I didn't fully understand. That makes much more sense. You still treat them as individuals, but they're individuals within a tribe, within a group of people. And then everything you do is like, how can this be more shareable? What does sharing this make them look cooler?
Yeah.
Does sharing this make them look smarter? Or why are they sharing it? So I think that's a good lens to put on, or a hat to put on when you're concepting to think, again, how does this go? How do we encourage word of mouth? But then, what type of word of mouth do we want? Hey, did you see this cool thing that Heineken did with the footy? It's like you're going to share it with that group of people versus your partner. Yeah. Whereas the Heineken stuff, or the bikies, or the kind of Valentine's Day, you'd probably share it with your buddies, but also you'd probably share it with your partner, your girlfriend, or vice versa. So it's kind of a nice, it's a different way of sharing. Yeah. For using the beer brand as an example.
Yeah. And I suppose to that point as well. The shareability it adds social credibility to the messaging as well, and I think that's something that is underdeveloped. Like there's a couple of things that are popping into my head. Mark Ritson, who I probably should have been mentioning by name, is a professor in Melbourne for a business school, and he writes for BRW, and he's been really getting under my getting my goat at the moment. Because he's talking about numbers and figures when he talks about social media and how much time people spend on it and whatever else. And not necessarily the trickle-down effect of, all right, so what you're trying to do as a marketer is actually create targeted messaging for a specific tribe, group, that find that shareable, they can attach their identity to it. So he's talking about just numbers. And when you look at social media, it's pretty underwhelming. But when you actually create communications that do generate that or inspire people to want to connect other people to it, you've done something right. And that credibility that's then attached to that messaging is far outweighs broadcast. And I think broadcast isn't ineffective, and I'll never say that, and I suppose that's one of the other problems, is there's a lot of evangelists that think that social is the be-all and end-all of everything. And actually it's just a cog in a larger mechanic that should be working together. And I'm not insinuating that social solves our problems, but if you're failing at social, you're probably not getting the first bit of the puzzle right. And so if it's not getting shared, if it's not generating social credibility and traction, that the message at the start is probably not right. So you can still pay for 18 million people to see it, but if that's not generating organic traction in the community or the people that you want to inspire to attach to your product, then you're probably getting it wrong from the very beginning. Which is really shits me about this guy. It's like, yeah, you can still pay and bash someone in the face 18 million times with the same message, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's resonating with that audience. I think that to an extent that's the power of social. It's the power of creativity.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's the power of strategy, it's the power of insight, and actually coming up with something that really, really clicks with someone that they feel compelled to then share.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to build on that, social media at this moment in time is the tip of the iceberg of the conversation. So, I mean, the dark social, which is kind of slightly ironic, i.e. all those conversations that happen between people not on social media, is still estimated to account for like 80% of all conversations around brands. Right? So you can probably try and take what's happening on social media, hopefully, broadly perhaps, as a proxy for what's happening for a conversation around your brand broadly in kind of, around a table in a pub. Barbecue around the corner, on the beach. And so it's a good barometer, right? It's an interesting idea. Use it as a good barometer for, if you're generating conversation in that environment, well then you're probably generating conversation elsewhere, and conversation is the key driver of effectiveness in communications.
Cool. Has anyone got any questions up to this point?
If you look at an Optus, for example, who's rebranding right now, you land on their Facebook page. It's basically their customer service platform or their customer complaint platform right now. And they are in the process of rebranding. Obviously, it's something we don't know yet. Thinking that they're going to focus on fixing their customer service. How do you work with a brand that has a bad reputation and that has a basically bad audience on a Facebook page? Can you fix that? Do you work in a specific way on a specific campaign, or you need to go further down in the brand story and on a long-term strategy?
I think there's two threads there. One is that for telcos, you're always going to have shitty customers. Like they're so big, like banks. You're always going to have people that are pissed off with you. And actually, I think that's the definition of what social media means to particular businesses and industries. For service-based industries, I think it should actually be used more as a service tool, as people use a certain communication technique more often. They want to connect with you across those, and there's nothing wrong with having that conversation and using it as a communications platform. But yeah, I think that you can't. The other thing is sometimes I think companies tend to bend to the loud minority rather than really understanding how to negate negative conversation at its source. If someone's having a bitch and moan.
It's a proxy of what you said basically on social media, outside of social media. That's basically what you mean.
Yeah, look, I think there's always going to be companies that are going to cop phenomenal amounts of slack. And probably rightly so, to be honest. They didn't turn up on time or whatever else. And I think there's ways to manage that. Telstra did really well with the 24/7 Facebook page. So they're trying to divert from what is supposed to be a brand-centric page to something that they've actually defined as a service channel. And actually, Telstra is probably one of the better social media businesses, or social media savvy businesses in Australia, like it or not, but Commonwealth Bank as well. But so it's all right. What role does this fulfil? Social media, from a business perspective, if it's got a service deliverable, then you've got to expect people to be shitty across those channels. I don't think you can negate that, and if anything, you should actually harness it. And go over and above. I think Hyundai had a circumstance where someone was coming on and complaining about and they operate on a franchise basis, and one of their franchises, their dealers, completely ripped this person off. Like, they got an invoice repairing things that didn't even exist on their vehicle for like $2,000, something ridiculous like that. And they actually turned it into a bit of a good news story and contacted the person and refunded all their money and whatever else, and gained traction. And maybe good any PR is good PR. I'm not sure, but I just think you need to define the channel, and that also dictates how it's operated. So if it needs to be 24/7, but it needs to be 24/7 for a telco. It probably should be 24/7. Actually having someone moderating, making sure that things are getting escalated, and it probably shouldn't fall in the hands of an agency. When social media is more of a communications platform and tactical, then it probably should be, agency strategy side.
And I think it should be upfront as well. Like, if you've got a brand that consumers have a problem with, the worst thing you can do is try and hide that on social media, just pretend it doesn't exist, because it's going to get bigger and bigger. Like, an example that I've used many times in terms of brand perception and changing brand perception with a mechanic through social is with Supre, one of our clients, and they had a big brand perception issue for a number of years before they got on Facebook, which was that a lot of younger girls viewed their models and viewed Supre's attitude towards how girls should look as not being realistic. Like, a lot of consumers viewed Supre's
not slutty enough.
This is it, right?
Yeah,
like
sluttiness is up here.
we would get avalanches of comments coming, because it grew really fast, this page. Like, over 500,000 people are in there now, and we had an issue up front quite early on that just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, which was, Supre doesn't know what a real Australian girl is. They just believe that there's slick thin models and that's it. And we had just so many negative comments coming through, and this negative sentiment was building and building, and we had to do something. So I just thought about it and just talked to the marketing manager over there, and just totally addressed it up front and built this campaign called This Is Who I Am, which all we asked was that girls upload a picture of themselves doing something they love doing, be it riding a bike, a horse, or playing, golf.
Don't go there, Ash. I can see it. Coming over it. Just upload pictures of what you like doing.
One joke per thing.
And we finished it off with asking them to write sort of a one-sentence caption about what they loved about themselves, and finished it off with "This Is Who I Am." And that was all the campaign was. There was no sort of reward in it or anything like that. And in the space of that 2-week long campaign, we had no media behind it. We got about 1,400 images uploaded to the page. And there was a lot of younger girls who were quite insecure about themselves, but they had the balls to go out there and post this image, talk about what they loved about themselves, and what happened. That was the wrong word. And what we saw was amazing. We saw not just the brands, we saw, on average, for every image uploaded, about 5 to 7 comments coming back from other girls in the community saying, "Hey, I think you're beautiful, you're amazing, people shouldn't put you down," all this sort of stuff. And all of a sudden, we became this vehicle for girls we became this platform that allowed girls to express something about themselves in a positive way, and have other girls mount positive sort of sentiment back on them. And what occurred because of that was negative sentiment within that community was completely diminished, basically. And it has been ever since. We've run that campaign now for 3 years with no media, and it just gets bigger and bigger every year. So in terms of sort of minimising negative sentiment, I just think face it straight up front, be really public and honest, and your consumers are going to respect you for it. And if you come up with a mechanic that's easy and smart to do, you're going to win out eventually.
I think Luke's example, if they're talking about it at the barbecue or at the pub, you can't then address it. So if someone's complaining about the service they had with Telstra at the pub, you can't then come in and say, well, actually, it was because of X, Y, Z, or actually address that issue. So in some ways it's actually good that they're putting it on social, because then you can address it. If you go over the top, like Jules said, you can then turn that into a positive, or like you did there. So if there's a vocal minority on social, there's probably a vocal minority or even larger group that can't be asked to like you and then, or even comment on your page. So it's almost like a free user survey of what do our customers think of us. Oh, well, Vodafone says, our network sucks, so what do? They fix their network. And then they can address that directly. So it's actually, in some ways, almost a positive for some of these service-based industries to fix issues, nip it in the bud. The issue I have with some of these things is someone complains, and it goes all the way up to like the GM. Someone's complaining on our Facebook about something. It's like, we'll work sometimes who cares? But then they go over the top of that. There could be an old lady that's calling up that just gets put up. That just gets a really canned response. So sometimes I think the Facebook complaints kind of get elevated to like, mission critical, stop the press.
I think you've got to be really careful with listening too heavily to the loud minority. I remember there was one brand, and I won't go into names, there was a song that was played on their TVC that was associated with some themes that they didn't necessarily want to be attached to. They had 2 complaints on their Facebook page that pulled the TVC. And it was just like,
And is that a lack of education on the client
side?
side?
But if 2 people called their, to your point, if 2 people called their customer service centre, or if even 2 people complained to the ASP, they wouldn't give a shit. Yeah. And they would not have cared. But it was just because it was so visible, exactly. Anybody could see these 2 complaints that they felt that it was more dramatic than what it was. And I suppose, you see a lot of clients becoming really concerned about the song. And I think humour is a really, really good way of negating the loud minority.
Depends on the complaint, though.
Yeah,
it does. It does. And, I've seen Westpac to Westpac. I've seen Westpac. Like there was this woman that came onto their Facebook page and Twitter once. She was complaining that she had terminal illness, and she was going through. And it's interesting how quickly they reacted. But she had terminal illness, and she was going through shit with their legal department about getting power of attorney switched over to her husband. And almost immediately their PR department jumped on that and goes, actually, this is something fucking serious, rather than someone going, oh, I don't know the song, man. And within about 5 minutes, she was actually back online going, my God, what an amazing piece of service I just received. Because, you know what I mean? So it's you've just got to think sensibly.
Think like a human.
Yeah, exactly. The people are there to interact and to connect.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's really, really. Sometimes I find it really, really strange how brand managers react to negative sentiment, and people will always have negative sentiment, whether it's in the pub or whether it's online.
I just wish consumers had realistic expectations. Like, I commented on your Facebook page 4 hours ago and I haven't seen a response. And it's like, just the brand manager's like gone home for the day.
Yeah.
And responds. Like, I think consumers just need to chill out a bit as well. Like, this ad is still on TV.
Let's do a campaign about that.
Yeah.
Chill out, guys.
Chill out. Yeah, I think Facebook can do a good job in telling all the people on Facebook to chill out. Also, if you see an ad, that's how Facebook makes money. So stop complaining about these seeing ads. So I really think that should be Facebook's job. Everyone knows TV ads, what TV ads do. People don't understand what ads on Facebook, or if they're seeing a Twitter ad, like, why is that there? Because it's like, I've never seen this before, this is new. And so I think those channels have a responsibility to protect all the revenue money that they're earning. Like, they live and die by advertising now.
I love the get off my newsfeed marked as spam. It's like, all right, cool, dude, just... Yeah. The fact that you took enough time and effort to do that, we've probably made an impact. You know what I mean? Fucking hate us, but we've made some sort of...
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions?
Well, when we talk about social, a lot of time we talk about social, Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Google+. What about, like, the rest of the social web? So, forums. So, for example, you might have been incredibly engaged, Frequent Flyer, forum or a money blog forum or blogs in general. How do we prove to clients that there's ROI in those channels? Because it's not about likes, it's not about shares, it's actually, you know what, there's some random guy who's engaged in you and so he's not going to be. How do you prove an ROI there?
The problem with those ones is there's no salesman from that forum calling the brand managers or the brands and hosting sessions to say, this is why you should be on the platform. They don't have an office, so it doesn't get the attention of... we have to then say, hey, you should be on these forums, you should be on this database and stuff. But the problem is, like I said, all the attention's going to social, but it's going to the loudest ones that have got the biggest sales team: Facebook, Twitter. Facebook definitely, Twitter a little bit. And also what's getting the buzz. Forums, email databases, that do not get buzz in the industry press. So they don't open up magazines going, forums are amazing, you should be on forums. So in terms of them, it's like, why are you trying to get me on a forum? I haven't read it in BNT or Ad News, so it must be useless. So there's a lot more things than, it's a bigger job for the whole industry. We need to start educating. There's more than just Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest, or Pinterest comes up. It's getting a lot of press, but it's like, unless you really, look at some of the biggest brands, like the return on investment's not there. So it's an industry thing we have to let everyone know. I think mummy bloggers are probably the only ones that get any look in, or fashion forums.
There are some tools or companies that you can use, of course, to target those people specifically, because they probably do hold quite a lot of value, and you can try to unpick the extent to which the conversation that's happening within that forum has some kind of cascade effect throughout the social web, and so you can kind of try and pinpoint that. So companies like DigiVisor, for example, you can utilise, and they'll pinpoint those people and look at those behaviours and see how whatever they're saying is spreading through the web. The other question, of course, going back to the commercial growth, is just the extent to which you're preaching to the converted, or so what are you trying to get out of those people? Is it incremental sales, is it advocacy, etc., and then pinpoint them exactly and go after them. But I agree, they don't get nearly as much airtime as they probably should do.
Yeah, and it's definition of what you're trying to achieve. If you're trying to, like I always say that owned media should be the end goal, because Facebook essentially is borrowed media. So what you're doing is as soon as they start to instill different parameters around how you can interact with your audience, you don't necessarily own. And so it just depends on what role a blogger has and how they're pushing into your broader communications ecosystem and strategy. And there's huge merit to engaging with all, and it's also, so even if a blogger sort of latches onto a story that you've got, or latches onto something, if it's disingenuous, if it's not social, it's still going to fall flat. So, ROI, I still think, is dictated by the strength of the strategy and the strength of the creative, and to a large extent the strength of the product. You can't go and just tell a blogger to blog about cyanide and it's going to be the next fashion craze. Or it might be, actually. I've seen some idiots put some ridiculous shit in their bodies for fashion. But I suppose it's that definite. I think that's a role of. I don't know whether Luke would agree, but that's a role of strategy. Is really, really defining what the end game is, and then looking at the best tactics, platforms, and channels to then ladder back to that end game of we want to create a database of X people. But we want them to be passionate supporters, and actually we're going to use those as a bottom-up influencer data, whatever. But I just think there's different. Everything has their merits. I think that Facebook is the loudest person in the room, and sometimes not the most effective. And I think that it's being treated more and more so like broadcast media, which is completely the wrong way to be using social spaces.
It's also the easiest. Everything outside of. Facebook's easy because you can target, you can advertise, it's all one ecosystem, but the forums and that, there's so, like forums and blogs and other user groups and stuff like that, they're so spread out. It's actually a lot of work to do them properly. And so you almost have to put in the, return on investment in terms of the time and also the trying to convince the client. And Facebook will be the de facto one because it's the easiest for them to understand. They've heard about Facebook, they know it. If you're trying to, let's talk about Reddit, even that's getting a little bit more press now, but like anything outside of Facebook and Twitter, and that's like, whoa, talking about education, it's like that's in the dark social. Yeah. It's gonna be a lot tougher. So that it's up for us as an industry to start elevating those to be get a little bit more share of voice. And
to be honest with you, I think there's huge opportunity for, and I know this whole session is about what as agencies we want from clients, but there's huge opportunity from a commercial perspective for agencies to actually say, but we can get 50,000 people that are targeted this way and have 100% share of voice over these platforms, rather than be competing again with 50 different brands that have access to the exact same tools. And I know that from your experience with a lot of the gamification stuff that you guys do, is it just by getting into that underground nitty-gritty of it and going into all these forums and places where you know you should be seeding content for the right audiences, and you actually pick up phenomenal traction because you're the only fucking people talking to these guys.
Again, it goes back to there's probably not a user group or a lot of forums talking about banks, but if you've got a car brand, a fashion brand, a sporting team, a beer brand, or a vice or something like that, you can find those. So it only doesn't work for every single type of kind of brand or consumer, but there's people that love bikes, people that love hot rods, people that love animation. So you just have to find again where can we be? Are other people talking about our brand or our kind of our category really?
So interesting on that point. So a car brand, a motorbike brand.
Yep.
Do you reckon the reason why as agencies we don't focus on this because forums aren't sexy? Whereas like Twitter, I can see that on an awards paper. Facebook, I see that on an awards paper. Can't see whirlpool.net.au on an awards paper. Is that kind of a bit of us to blame?
Yeah, the car brands are definitely Jeep they have obviously Facebook pages for that. There's a lot of Jeep lovers that have their own user groups, their own forums and stuff. And I've seen Jeep create their own kind of be in that space. That Facebook's kind of secondary to being in these kind of communities. VW, bike brands, Ducati owners. Do not try and target them on Facebook. They're on their Ducati forums. It might be a smaller group, but that's who you want to target. So.
Yeah, I don't know whether agencies aren't there. They may just not talking about the fact that they're not there. We work on Canon at Leo Burnett, and we're definitely going out into the photography forums. But, we might not, but it just doesn't have a huge amount of scale, and it's just a small tactic within a whole bunch of tactics that we're employing, and so therefore it's just it's a small piece of the puzzle.
I think you'll start to see more of that once you start to see creative and technology merging as well, is because what will start to happen, and I hope the media sort of starts to come on board, because what I think is you'll start to see really creative machinations within those forums. So how they actually use the forums to generate interest, and it's not just posting something that then links back to your Facebook page or back to your latest link. They actually start to look at those as creative platforms to use the mechanics that people are using in the thread streams. And I suppose it's like there was one I recently saw from VW where they did their meta tagging on images so that when people typed in a certain term searching for images, it came up with a banner ad. But they did that because that was a real intersection between someone that understood the hierarchy of how Google meta tagged and placed their images on a search, but also that creative application that going, this would be cool, this would be interesting to just do it this way. And I think you'll start to see more and more of that there's going to be sort of these benign or apparently benign platforms that are being used more creatively as well. And I can't even think of the last time I think Facebook was used. Facebook was used creatively anyway.
Big statement.
What?
I can't remember the last time Facebook was used creatively. It's a big statement.
Well, no. I can't.
You mean the actual
platform itself? I can't. Yeah.
To answer your question, though, I think it all comes down to, in my mind anyway, in my experience, it comes down to the consumer you're talking to and the brand that you're doing the work on behalf of. One that sort of cemented that, or this, approach to forums in my mind was doing work on Weight Watchers. And losing weight is an incredibly personal journey or topic that people are incredibly emotive about. And starting a Facebook page around Weight Watchers and encouraging people to share how much weight they've lost or anything like that can be incredibly, or not dangerous, but you're less likely to see people like Weight Watchers Facebook page for fear that their friends are going to see that, hey, shit, I'm admitting to I've got a weight problem and I'm not going to do it. Whereas if you look at the Weight Watchers forums, they've got over 500,000 people in there, and it's one of the most active in the country. Because it operates on I have trouble with this word every single time, anonymity, policing that or looking after that and seeing the traffic that rolls through that forum was amazing, because people could essentially hide behind an anonymous profile or something like that and still ask real questions about themselves and get real answers back. So it all comes back to who your consumer is, what they want to get out, what they want from the brand, what they want from you, or why they're there, and from that, I think you can make a decision based on whether forums are good or bad, or whether you use Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. It's 7:30. We're going through to 8:30. Does anyone have one more question? Otherwise, we'll break for like 10, 15 minutes.
When you sit down with, say, a CEO and they're demanding ROI, and it can be hard to communicate at times, do you find it's best to talk about, say, the return versus the cost, or do you have particular Facebook metrics that you may use to help convey, over time that it's working, and say this is a long-term vision and we're going to be using these particular metrics as ROI?
Yeah. I think you have to ask them what they want to get out of social first. But they seem to love seem to be filling out a lot more KPI spreadsheets lately as the focus goes onto it. To say, I want to be able to know if I'm succeeding or not. And it's a lot of time it is just how many fans have I got? How much does it cost per fan? And for them, sometimes that's enough, and that's kind of sad that that's enough. In some ways. But then you can also, a lot of them have bought a lot of media through TV or digital. It's like, I know reach and frequency and cost per that reach. And so you can put it in those terms, like you're going to reach this many people, this many times for this cost. And they can compare it across it because they're a lot more FA with TV, how TV works.
I think to build, you've got to slice off a portion of the budget and invest it into measurement and evaluation. And relative to who you're targeting, and the ways that you track the brand and the success of the communications that you're doing, across the board, you've then got to try and plug as best you can social into that. And there are, and then that's about, getting a good research agency on board and working with you and what you're trying to do to make sense of that. And it's my continual frustration that it doesn't happen nearly enough. And then no one's really quite sure what the ROI of Facebook community is, or what is the commercial value of a fan. It's a scantily talked about topic of conversation, but it doesn't actually have to be that difficult to measure. I mean, there are some really simple ways that you can track that. I mean, you can basically just have a control cell. Look at the consumption value of one of your Facebook fans versus someone that isn't, but otherwise says that they adore that brand, and compare that difference and then track it over time. And you can start to pull apart the differences between what you're doing on Facebook and how potentially you're deepening that relationship with someone versus someone that isn't. And you can start to get a sense of what the value of that fan is.
Whenever you see what is the value of a fan, that's what they use. The more Aussie examples of that we can get, say that the more money they're going to spend on social, because if you can attribute it back to sales, and a lot of them do, it's like, the fan will spend on average more, 20% more than this, or 30% more. The more you can get of that, the more you can value.
Yeah, and you need that, right? Because then you can start to construct your ROI models that basically say, and thus if I acquire 100,000 more fans and it costs me this amount of money, well then I can expect this kind of commercial return from it. And there I go, I've got a case that I can walk into the CFO and go, no, we're not doing it because it's new and it's shiny. We're doing it because we've got these numbers that say it's going to deliver this kind of commercial growth for us.
Yeah, I think commercial acumen in advertising would help. I think that CEOs, IBM does a CEO study every year, and basically CEOs still think of the marketing department as a colouring in department. They don't necessarily see the ROI of any activity, and there's activity that they understand and they accept that they need to stay in market, reach, frequency, awareness. They just get it because it's always been there before they were there, and it's acceptable to them, and then they start to see all these new fad stuff. And I think financial acumen on our part would really, really help to say, right, so your cost per acquisition is X, and if we actually build up an earned community that we can tap into, connect with in this way, so we've got an email list, et cetera, that essentially what we're doing is we're saving X, and we're engaging with them, and they've got a higher disposition to spend of so-and-so, and they've got a higher disposition to share. So what we're doing is we're actually reducing our media spend by 30% due to the fact that we've invested in connecting with people about the right things, across the right media, and with the right products. And I fail to see too many marketing people nor too many advertising agencies could necessarily contextualise to a CEO with any conviction what value that they brought to the bottom line of the business. And I think that's probably something that we need to better articulate. And not just spit out, sort of random statistics and say Facebook fans worth $174, but actually be able to articulate to the CEO, your Facebook fans are worth blah. And actually, each time you execute against an MPD or each time you execute against a new campaign, that you're saving X in media spend because you've got this audience already accumulated, and they're willing to invest their time in promoting, articulating your brand to their networks, whatever else. And that sounds quite complex, but I just think that advertising has always struggled to contextualise its value in general to C-level, or specifically CFOs and CEOs. And I think that that's something that we have to work on as well. Just like Facebook has to educate consumers on advertising's role in that ecosystem and how it actually pays for a platform that they enjoy. We need to get much better, rather than just fluffy stuff, about contextualising to C-level executives the role that advertising, communications and relationship marketing plays in the long game.
If you can tie it back to how much reach, then you can go that way. If you can tie it back to sales, and it's going to be easier, a telco, what's the retention of a fan versus a non-fan? And if you can set up the research and get the test groups done, you'll probably find holy shit, this is probably the most valuable channel, or you might find it's actually useless and actually good, let's focus on something else. But I would love to have that across all our clients to say, yeah, a fan equals this much more consumption, or this better retention, or this average savings account. That would be fantastic.
So who actually, in your experience in non-social media, who pays for that research, and at what point is the decision made to buy that research in the process from when you're selected as an agency through to the end of the campaign? And how can we mirror something that works in non-social media, as it were, and try and take that process into social media for things like proper research with control groups, etc.?
I mean, the decision, typically with most large organisations, they'll tend to have a consumer insights department, or and it will be those guys that typically are commissioning the research, I encourage all my planners. I try to have a very close relationship with those people in those roles, to make sure that we're, and this is a conversation not just about social media, but generally around communications. So we're really, really clear, and we've got shared understanding about how we're expecting our communications to work against what people, and thus we're being very, very clear about how we're measuring it the right way. Now, there is no simple answer. It varies from brand to brand, etc., consumption and different, look at cars.
As agencies, you're coming with a certain amount of money, right? And do we sacrifice 10% of that money that's coming to us, and to prove our worth, to hopefully increase the size of the pie? Or do we say to clients, you need to put aside separate budget out of your marketing budget? Do we take responsibility as agencies for that, or is that something we need to sort of...
I would encourage all agencies to try and take responsibility for that conversation if it isn't happening already. Perhaps we should all be hungry to understand whether our work is working, basically, because otherwise... Well, too often perhaps we are.
I reckon there's a lot of
media
agencies don't want that research.
Don't want to know.
Their staff is not helping.
Yeah. I'm a planner, right? Planner's the fundamental job. The fundamental job of a planner is to make sure that every dollar that your clients spend delivers commercial return. That is really fundamentally the core of what my job is. And so then you've got to try and help and be clear and be insistent about the idea that we're going to measure those things as honestly as we are, as possible. And I think you've just got to drive that conversation as best you can. It's with small budgets, it becomes a tricky conversation. If you're only spending $200,000 and it's going to cost you $50,000 to measure it, it's difficult to justify 25% of the budget to go into understanding whether it worked. Sadly, those conversations are often then in failure. But most of those brands tend to be spending money on more than just that $200,000. So let's assume they're spending $3 $3-4 million, over the course of the year, and they've got an overall brand tracker that's tracking that, well, then extend the scope of that to then be able to take in that 200 grand and just be really clear, because often those people that are in the consumer insights roles are not cognizant of the smaller tactical things that are going on, and so therefore they get missed and they don't get tracked, and everyone just does them and kind of goes, oh well, we got some great kind of Facebook engagement, everyone can feel warm and fuzzy about it, but no one's really sure about whether it's actually done anything. So probably the moral of the story is just make sure it's done up front against whatever the total research budget and how that's being aligned against the kind of the macro spend of that.
I suppose it's also an issue with a lot of, I think we've come to this point where a lot of brand managers wouldn't have a clue what shifts the dial. They wouldn't know what metrics to even, or KPIs.
CMOs have been for years across lots of different media.
That's a little harsh.
Processes in place.
Well,
Why aren't they using those for social? Is it because no one's going to spend the budget, and how we get them to spend the budget?
like I said, I don't know whether
like this much of their budget, so it's like, well, and we're trying to shift the needle when they're spending X amount, say out of $10 million budget for the year, they're going to spend $300,000 on social, and you want them to, can you change when you do your brand tracking to match up social campaign? No, so it's a bit harder if you don't command the amount of the dollars they're spending.
And so I think then you just got to be bloody minded about it. Well, don't do it. If you're not going to know what it's doing, then don't bother doing it. Because why bother? If you don't know whether it's going to do anything, then why would you bother doing it in the first place?
Or if you don't want to even prove a hypothesis, I suppose.
Don't
I
bother.
suppose is the point.
But being all serious, we'll say that. Right.
Or if you don't want to prove a hypothesis. If you want to say, I think it's going to do this.
Well, I mean, if you don't believe in your work, then you shouldn't be doing it either.
Well, no, if you put a piece of work out there and you say, I think it's going to do this.
Yeah.
And then you can actually substantiate that and increase investment. We were talking earlier about sort of seeding investment in. I don't know whether we even answered your question in regards to who takes responsibility of the research. I suppose it's a collective.
The bigger, your bigger brands, or they have multiple brands, they usually have a separate budget. It's even separate from marketing.
Yes, exactly.
That tracks it, so it's really on them. But I think you're right. They should be talking to the brand managers and say, I'm running these campaigns at this time, so running a campaign in January, please don't do the brand tracking in. You could still do the brand. But if you're going to do it in December, it's kind of, and my brand tracking is always low. I never see shift the needle because you're always, try and make it match your marketing if you can, or track it in January and then check it in December, and has it kept the level that you wanted.
I suppose invariably one of the frustrations that we've had from a digital perspective is being integrated into the process of what's being asked from a research perspective, especially psychographic research for some of our clients, and really trying to get into the brains and minds of how people are interacting. I remember I was in a focus group once looking through or what is it?
One-way
glass, two-way mirror. And they were asking all these questions about, key images and colours of packaging, and what I thought is shit that you're not going to change so late in the game anyway. Why even ask the question? But they didn't even ask, if you saw this TV, see how would you investigate the product, or how would you find out about it, or how would you ask your friends for more information, or if it actually if something piqued your interest about this gambit of stuff we're showing you, where's the next step? And I encouraged the researchers to do that, and they said, I would probably go on Google, and then maybe I'd post something on Facebook and ask, has anybody else tried this? And I suppose it's because you're starting to get really complex and really, really muddled with how consumers interact and behave and whatever else. And I was thinking about this today when I'm researching for a holiday, and I'm actually finding the social space really confusing as well now, is that I'm actually starting to rely more on that tight-knit network that I've created in social media to give me advice and understand those changes in how consumers find products and how they interact with advertising and how that influences their behaviour, their connection to social. It starts to get really, really confusing, and I think that, it's quite a big task to undertake, and sometimes it perhaps, for a lot of people, better left unsaid than actually really, really dive into.
We rely on someone who's very large to spend a lot of money, do the case study, and then we reuse that case study to death like we have for Dell over the last 4 years. We still talk about it. It's 2007, it's been years. So it's been that long since there's been a decent case study with actual numbers that we could reuse.
Let's just make one up.
It's like
Everyone just agrees.
Make one up.
So when we come back from the break, guys, it's going to be a workshop session. We're going to come up with some.
Someone grease the palms of a research agency.
What
to
stats
make
do we
one up.
need to prove what we need to
Exactly.
prove, and then we'll just all
That's
stand
it.
by that's gospel. Done.
On that, we will have a break. Does that sort of answer the question?
Yeah, I think
One thing that I just wanted to touch on with all three of you guys, your opinions on, is a pain point I know that exists between client and agency quite heavily involving social, and that is the aspect of approval processes around content, specifically, content for fast-moving social platforms like Twitter or Facebook, whereby sort of in the past agencies have created or they've adopted a sort of campaign-based model where they'll come up with an idea, create an execution, release it into market, pull it back out of market after 2 months, could be print, media, radio, whatever, analyse it, and then optimise it, and then send out another idea 3 months later, and that's usually a cyclical process of about 3 months. And during that process, content or ideas get approved and discussed and stuff like that. Whereas now, in the age of social media and like Facebook and things like this, you're having to create as a brand content maybe daily. So you're talking about 7 pieces of content that you need to get approved every single week, 52 or 54 weeks, whatever it is a year. And I see a lot of sort of inefficiencies where clients or agencies are trying to apply old school approval processes to this new area where content's created at a volume and scale that's never ever been seen before. So,
But at a very low importance level. The same scrutiny sometimes for a Facebook post or a tweet is at the same level as when you're approving a TC.
slightly different, yeah. But still, people have to approve it internally and be aware of it. So I was just wanting to get you guys' opinion on, do you develop these processes internally in terms of approvals for content and then apply it to all of your clients, or do you adopt what your clients' approval processes are and then bring them internally?
For us it's the latter, but we have a couple, specifically for social, we have some clients we say, initially you say, here's the gates, and you can't do anything like this, you can't do anything like this, but everything within that kind of, maybe a gate, but here's the bucket you can work within. As long as you work within that, I don't need to see it for very fast turnaround stuff. And then they're the great clients. We bang stuff out quite quickly, and it has great response. We don't have to wait. We can react quite quickly.
Parameters that say
that's a better word.
If we create content within this bucket, you don't need to approve it.
Yeah, as long as it can't be this, it can't be that. It has to be on brand. That's the parameters, and you work within that. It's great. Then we have campaign social stuff that obviously it's pre-approved, but that gives us much more freedom than having to go through line by line. Here's everything we want to say. The biggest approval thing I hate is when you have to add trademark to a brand name. Obviously, if the brand is spelled in all caps, that's great. But then I want you to add a TM to every social post. It's that's crazy.
Insert symbol.
Yeah, insert symbol. You're taking up one of my valuable 90 characters. The thing that people don't care about or need. So, but we work depending on the client, but we try and, if we can, establish a kind of parameter. That's the ideal model.
And you place it across all of your clients?
We've tried to in other clients that they want to see it weekly or they want to see it monthly. We kind of we say we may change it 2 or 3%, but there's usually sticking points. It needs to be usually about the brand. It has to be in caps. You can't say it this way.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I think that answered your question.
Yeah.
I've no idea. Sorry.
Too far up the chain. I'm down in the coal mines. right in Facebook posts. You're planning above.
I think our process is right, and I'll probably put this to Michelle in a second, but one of our account executives. Our process has changed a lot in regards to exactly what you were talking about, the volume. So what we try and do is pre-plan topical posts. So we'll have a 6 to 12 month conversation calendar. What we can predict is actually going to happen over the next 12 months and come up with stuff, literally feed that into creative and go, all right, so we've got these strategic pillars and creative pillars that we're pursuing from a brand perspective. How relevant are these particular events? Or for Heineken, for argument's sake, I suppose that they've got a proposition that they're trying to appeal to aspirational men. So we're trying to find quirky events that are happening around the world that really tap into their behaviours and their wants to be more international. And so we'll actually pre-plan sort of 6 to 12 months, and then get its trust. So a lot of reactive stuff that you just and I think that accounts, executives, managers, etc., they're the coalface, and they're probably best to identify really reactive opportunities to go, actually, this is something that's relevant or on topic or meets one of our 3-4 conversation pillars, strategic pillars. We should be approaching the client and saying this is a great opportunity. Adam Scott winning the Masters for argument's sake, that was literally us getting into the office that morning going, fucking Australia's going to win the Masters for the first time in whatever it was, or the first time ever. And us going to Heineken and saying, we should post about this. That's an Australian becoming a man of the world. Doing something significant. They actually had this post that they posted last US Masters. And we'll just repurpose it and say, here's to Adam Scott, whatever. So I think it's a mixture between having the foresight to pre-plan and having the confidence of a client to be really reactive and really, really on the button and actually going, you guys know what you're talking about. We've defined that this is our purpose and our role in social, and being able to press the button on creative really, really quickly.
Yeah.
We've had to change our internal processes. Rather than having social be the social team be the sole responsibility, now it's the social and creative team. And I know it seems kind of silly, but we kind of initially had them separate and saying, the creative team, and sometimes with no oversight. So now we've realised, the creative team has to have oversight, or the creative team can create stuff, and then the social team will filter that and try and massage it to be more socially shareable or something like that. Because I think sometimes the creative team comes, that's really funny, but that's not going to work for that platform. Or it's like, here's my tweet, it's 250 characters. And that's too long. No, but that's the thing, it's ironic that it's so long. No one's done this before, no one's done a really long tweet. It's like, reason.
That's original.
Yeah.
You don't get the joke, man.
So there's some that we've changed our processes. We've tried to make all clients work to the same approval process. That's the parameters one to make it easier. So otherwise, if you adapt it to every client, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Did I summarise? That's pretty much how we work, right?
I think it varies from client to client, though. I mean, some clients, like we've got Coca-Cola, for example, they've got really globally bound approval processes that are impossible to budge. So, I mean, with some clients, I think definitely, and ultimately it would be great to get them to work around how we want to do business, but it varies, definitely.
Yeah.
So, you have to make do with what you've got, really, in some cases.
I've got one funny story about approval process on post. There was one global brand that accidentally posted just hello by mistake, and that was their best performing post. So if you went to the client and said, we're going to post this hello, what do you think? They go, no, that's not approved, it's not brand. I thought that was quite hilarious. So if you can, try and sell it in.
Just to build up from Leo's point of view to answer
I was going to bring that in,
on behalf of Luke. I think what we'd like to see at Leo is if it's what we want from our clients. And I always talk about the Oreos example of the tweet that everybody knows about. And the reason that was able to happen was the collaboration between the client, the event happening, and the agency, and everybody being there in the room at the same time. I think the rumours is 25 people, and that's a lot of head hours. But the fact that they work together to make that happen, and I think that's what I'm trying to, and actually we're seeing a lot more of it with our clients, is working collaboratively to work around the processes that they have internally to do more interesting reactive, and the latest buzzword is real time, and how you can actually make that happen. So collaboration.
It's like telling a joke at a bar as well, right? Some shit's going to fall flat. And you shouldn't see that as a reflection of reactive or real-time conversation and creative. It's like sometimes things just, you don't have time to test them and do all that. And I think sometimes things are just going to fall flat. We've done a lot of reactive stuff that just hasn't worked.
It's frustrating for creatives as well, and I regularly talk to our creatives. They're like, we want to answer what the person said about their Facebook post. And I'm like, well, you can't, because it's got to go through 48 hours of approval processes. And they're like, but we still really want to. So I think it's just And I think that's something that we need to work on more in social, is figuring out how you can let more of that two-way conversation happen and get around the process approvals.
Yeah, I think your approach, Ash, is a brilliant one, and one that agencies are seeing, well, I'm seeing more and more agencies do, which is set up front with the client, these are the parameters we can play in, are you happy with that? And they're going, yeah. So then you can create content within that space and not need the approvals needed, not need the traditional approvals needed to make that go live. I think we'll see more and more of that sort of approach coming through.
The scary thing for brands now is that whole, was it, I don't know, it was Heineken, that one brand, or TUI's that got caught by, they didn't respond to someone posted up something false about the brand, and that was taken as a piece of communication. Was it? Oh
no, it's a dogfight.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing about, and it's almost a study that you want to do. You could do a thesis on communication in this, and how you get these ebbs and flows of this circular motion that seems to happen in social media, that it pops up every 6 months or so. This dogfight pops up. It happened in 2001 or something ridiculous. It was just a picture that was taken in Thailand, this dogfight that had Heineken banners. And it was actually a Heineken venue that they'd run these illegal dogfights in after hours, or something really peculiar like that. And then these images started popping up online, and they were like, oh, Heineken sponsors dogfighting. And Heineken was like, we don't condone this, we have never had a part of this. But it goes through like these 6 month flows where it sort of seems to resurface, and then it goes away, and then seems to resurface. And they've got their, modus operandi of, no, we don't sponsor and support dogfighting, is our international statement. It's just, the most interesting thing about that is how it just keeps on...
It is cyclical.
It keeps on coming back. It's weird. It's like, and it's just strange that...
Maybe someone's got it in their alarm.
I don't know, but it just keeps on sort of... It's this ebb and flow of social conversation. But it's the same thing. I've noticed it with my news feed as well. It's like you see these videos sort of circulating. It's the same thing happening over and over again. And I think it's actually because the social kudos wears off an asset, and then someone finds it for the first time, and they haven't seen it on the news feed, and they repost it thinking that they're the first people to actually post it. And because there's a lot of social credibility and equity is attached in kudos. Who shares it? Who breaks it? And I think it's actually just because people forget.
It's been broken 27 times.
Do you know what I mean? People just forget that they've seen it 50 times, or that they haven't seen it 50 times and they think they're the first. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah. I've never seen it.
Yeah. You're not Googling. You've got to Google dogfights. Google dogfights, and then you'll get all these dogfighting ads forever.
And you'll be brought up by IT and probably fired. But
so Luke, there's a point that you wanted to bring up which I really liked. Again, you wrote it, so I'm quoting you, so you may have to reread it. Be prepared to invest more to get ahead in learning, time and money. Winning in social is an opportunity for a competitive advantage. The lag time, and this is the really key, awesome bit that I liked, the lag time between change and corporate adaptation is where you can find your competitive advantage. Do you want to talk about that a wee bit?
Yeah, so maybe I'll start with the bit that you thought was most awesome, which was something that I stole from someone else. The lag time between, probably in this specifically, the lag time between technological change and corporate adaptation to that change is an opportunity for competitive advantage, i.e. adopt shit quicker than the guy next door to you, and maybe you'll be able to squeeze some advantage out of it, is probably the layman's terms of what that's trying to say. And but doing that obviously requires investment, and investment isn't just a monetary thing. I mean, I didn't contribute, but the conversation was about the investment of time and head hours that goes into making social work effectively. So it's head hour intensive, right? So that's money intensive, and also, we were talking earlier about education. Or lack thereof, right? Education or training is also an investment. Probably, I mean, we haven't touched on it, but it's a favourite topic of mine, is around culture of risk-taking in corporations, and probably the inability of corporations to genuinely operate in beta mode, i.e. let's put something out into market that isn't perfect and iterate it. It's just not the way that corporations are basically organised.
Not on purpose.
Not on purpose. Well, I mean, people basically, when you've got a 60-year-old guy who's CEO of an organisation, he's been brought up on the maxim of, make sure it's brilliant and then do it. And then when he sees one of his subordinates do something that isn't brilliant, he's going, no, trust me. Let's just, because we're going after a competitive advantage, we're going to do it faster than everyone else, and then we're going to make it better. He's going, no, dude, you just put my brand out into market with something that was a shitter than it could have been. Goodbye. Type of, and so that propagates that kind of sense of corporate fear, and so therefore people aren't doing it. But so therefore there's, but there is of course an opportunity to try and break those molds, to try and break that some of those cultural barriers, and to go after some of those opportunities that social affords you. I personally believe that while social might be, in terms of at least what you can see on the forums or on Facebook, etc., might be small than the reach that you can gain with TV, etc., that it is the tip of the iceberg, and that social buzz is a massive driver of effectiveness. And so therefore, if you can invest ahead of the curve as a brand, and you are prepared to do it, then there is the opportunity for competitive advantage, as long as you can align the culture and the people and the dollars to make sure that you're actually going to get as much scale around the thing as possible.
That's the mentality that everyone who got their own Second Life island. Telstra needed its own Second Life island. Let's get in there with first. Boom. Yeah. This is the best thing ever. And then what happened to that? So I think sometimes you definitely want to. Sometimes it's better to wait and see what's a bit like. Let's all jump into Pinterest. Yeah. Second Life's a much better example because that it's dead already. But if Pinterest isn't here in a year's time, was that a good investment? Is it great to jump into those things? For me, and as much as I love to adopt new technologies, I'm always the one that says, let's just wait and see. Like what happened to MySpace and stuff. I was like, you don't have to be the first.
No, definitely not.
Or if you're going to be the first, then milk it for being the first. It's like, this is the first home loan approved by a tweet. Boom, they did that. They didn't have to do it ever again. They got their worth out of it. So for me, it's if you're going to jump in, you jump in and know why you're jumping in first. It's a test and learn, but not like this is Second Life. We're going to do all our stuff on Second Life. Yeah. As they probably would have sold it.
Yeah, I think sometimes we overestimate how fast you really need to be. You don't actually need to be that fast. You don't need to be first. And actually going into Pinterest now, despite the fact that it's been around for 18 months and might, for probably most of the people in this room, feel a bit, Pinterest. I mean, seriously, yesterday's news. Well, actually, it's not really yesterday's news. It's still today's news.
I'm wearing Google Glass right now. But Google Glass is a great one. I mean, remember Segways? It was like, this is going to revolutionize cities. Cities are going to be redesigned around Segways. And Steve Jobs was in this mystery room and he's like laughing. They all came out laughing. It was amazing. The Google Glass will be the Segway. That's what I've read. Yeah. And I believe that's like, it's for nerdy white guys. And I think that's it. So, I mean, but I would love to have a brand doing something Google Glass just to get the press for it and to say, yep, kudos if we did that. But I wouldn't be investing like a whole bunch of stuff into Google Glass. Yeah,
I guess the reason why I like that so much and it resonated with me personally is because in the past, just at a practical, in terms of a practical example, Facebook are continually bringing out new ad units all the time. And what we've found, I think Roden's in the room, we've worked on a bigger brand, or a large FMCG brand for the last sort of 18 months. We built it from nothing with traditional ad units, with a small amount of budget to something like 9,000 fans within 2 or 3 weeks, and then sponsored stories came out the first time. And we decided to throw like 2 or 3 grand behind that to see if that's going to grow the page. And the day they launched that product, we put $2,000 behind it, and ended up getting a CPA, or cost per acquisition, of something like, I don't know, 5 cents, 9 cents.
Doesn't matter for the story.
Yeah. So I guess the fact of the story was that we were really, really quick and had the clients' confidence to invest money into this new ad unit that Facebook had just released. They didn't even know how it was really going to go, and we grew that page significantly under budget to somewhere like 120,000 fans who were qualified still, so they were the right fan base, by being fast and acting quickly when new products came into market. This, in this case, being Facebook ad units. I guess
that's a great example. I think mobile ad units are probably the most least utilised by media agencies, and also it's the most creatively limiting. But it's so cheap now, and same with Facebook ads. You know, the more people are going, there's a bidding system. So yeah, mobile ad units are that type of thing. Getting there now.
Whilst no one else is in there.
Yeah. Well, you know it. A lot of people are using it, so there's a lot of. That's a kind of a more of a media testimony. That's actually where you can get the most kind of return.
But there's context as well. I think we're missing the point that it's actually first mover advantage. So, and the guy that created Segways actually died on Segway as well.
No, it was the CEO.
Oh, CEO. Sorry.
I know the story. Segway buff here, everyone.
First mover. So the first thing that pops into my head is Obama. Right? So in an industry where there are actually established media, so social media was established, he's now accumulated a competitive advantage over having this phenomenally massive database that he can pull and pass on to his successor. That basically almost makes it insurmountable to catch up to him, because he's had 4-6 years of accumulating data and a presence online, whether that's own data, i.e. CRM, and et cetera, or whether that's social data and social learnings, that gives him a true competitive advantage. So I think it's industry specific, that you don't necessarily have to be the first person, you don't have to be the Apple of iPods, but within your industry you should at least be aware of Pinterest, what relevancy it perhaps has, and jump on it as and when you do have that net, you can create that network effect, and there's a relevancy to the strategic direction of the business and brand that you're trying to achieve as well.
Yeah. Awesome. This is one of your points, Joel, but Ash, I think you're going to tap into it as well, and Luke, you'll probably tap into. You said that we should, as marketers, be fueling people's identity, adding utilities, and giving them sort of entertaining assets, and provide them with social kudos, which I think if you condense all that, you're talking about gamification to some degree, but you're also talking about a level of personalisation that hasn't existed before, in terms of being able to access someone's Facebook profile, in doing that, you're essentially unlocking everything about them if you want. You can find out everything about them. And in terms of adding them or giving them the social kudos that they want, you're talking about the gamification element of things and giving them, a podium to stand on if they jump through a bunch of hoops for you. Do you guys feel that is where marketing, in terms of social marketing and platform marketing, is heading in the future? I know it's not quite. Ash, you're probably.
I'm kind of weird about gamification because it's such a broad term, and
I know
it's also misused quite a lot. And social for gamification, I don't have too much kind of thoughts on that. And when you talk about social kudos, maybe it's like, for us, we work on Xbox. They, in terms of their gamification, they just love to game, like, I want to be, like, people being first. That's kind of annoying, but that's kind of their kudos there, but they kind of have fun with that. We game them in terms of, I've almost separated gamification separately to the social stuff, really, right? The stuff we've done.
Yeah.
I'm not. I haven't got a good answer.
That's right. Out of interest, how many times has gamification, the word or the concept or topic, come up with discussions with clients for you guys in the last sort of 6 months?
It's an add-on. It's like, well, let's do this. Why don't we have some gamification?
So it's like an add-on without really knowing what it is.
Yeah. For me, it's a hack to where when you're concepting and saying, like, can we gamify this, or can we turn this into to increase the engagement with something, versus, if it's just, if it's like, here's an image that we want people to like, but if we can say collectively, like, if we get 1,000 likes, then we'll do this. Like, that's almost a level of gamification, like we've leveled up. So just like, how can we have consumers play with the stuff that we're doing? That for me is, gamification. Gamification for us is more when we've done communities outside of Facebook. We created a forum for Activision games and stuff, and we use the kind of, the classic achievement elements. The more you do on the forum, the more achievements you get. That was a simple element of gamification, like rewarding on that. like kudos comes down to, I think Yahoo's got a great thing about social status being you've got people who are would like to be seen as on forums they have like on have a tier system.
Yeah.
People love saying like I've posted 1,000 times, so I'm like a premium member. People love that badge. And then newbies have a bad badge of you've only posted 3 times. You're obviously not part of this real community. And so socially we're all humans. We all love different badges. That's why a title is almost like in a gamification level. That's like your level. If it just said junior, you'd be like, oh, junior versus CEO. CEO is like, I've leveled up. I'm at the top of my game. So we all live in gamification land. But I think where it's misused a lot is just giving badges or rewards.
Yeah.
I like when it's more about a psychological level of rewarding people. Maybe the first person to share this. It's not really gamification, but gets the kudos for being the first to share it.
Well, this game, there is. I completely agree with you. Like gamification is such an overused bullshit term, and actually gamification is taking at its raw is taking something that you're trying to achieve and then adding game mechanics to it. What I meant by kudos is exactly what you're referring to. Is actually giving someone a mantle to stand on and attach some sort of hierarchy in a social structure based on the fact that they shared first. Yeah. It's not got to do with gamification, and there might be elements of gamification, but it's not like the game. It's not like creating game mechanics where you're creating a sticky platform on the basis that they're earning points and whatever else. So there's sort of 2 different things. Kudos is more so how do you project the fact that you are an influencer.
Yeah, a good one to look at is like Yahoo have these like design patterns. They have a design pattern for how to do a shopping cart, a design pattern for how to do certain things. And they have a design pattern for communities, and that's been really helpful for me. There's there's people. Is your community combative? So Xbox Live is combative. You practically battle against other people to get better, or is it a collaborative one where people collaborate together to create something? Or is it altruistic where it's like Yahoo Answers, where people just answer things? Why would anyone answer a question for nothing? Because they want the kudos of saying, I've helped 5,000 people with that question. So they have a few more. It's really good to think about a community. And so we could say for Xbox, we do that almost like a competitive and combative audience. Whereas for Super, it's a collaborative, like let's all talk together. But for Xbox, I don't mind having, here's a riddle, first one to solve it wins. That gets off on that audience because they're very inherently combative and competitive, I guess.
Yeah.
So check that out. Like, just go Google Yahoo design patterns, and there'll be a whole bunch, like really for UI stuff. But that is one that I've used quite a bit, and they have like cool icons and stuff. So that's my like tip there when you're putting that. So you can say we're going into this. What is our community? What type of community do we want? A competitive, a collaborative, and then how the ranking system is it? Do you have do you have levels like level 1, 2, 3, or is it like chief, junior, that type of thing? There's all these different things, design decisions around gamifying or around your community.
Yeah,
so,
cool. And Jill, in terms of fueling people's identity and giving them utilities and things like that, what's your take on that? How does that fit within social?
I think it's integral to the success of social. I think
how deep do you go?
A lot of brands don't understand what role they play in consumers' lives. So everybody spurts off Red Bull as this fantastic example of social content, but what they're not necessarily social. They've got a content strategy, and they know really how to attach people to their brand through aspiration. And they're not even inspiration, they're aspiration, because I can guarantee you it's some guy sitting there playing Xbox, watching a Red Bull clip, smashing 50 cans of Red Bull, and he's probably 200 kilos overweight. So,
thanks for generalising gamers.
But I'm a gamer as well. But you know what I mean? It's like then doing a free fall off a canyon in the US or whatever is pretty unattainable for someone that probably can't be held by any type of man-made wire.
Like Felix jumping from space is amazing, kind of amazing stunt. But in terms of is it very social? It's social because it was shareable and everyone want to be part of it. You couldn't. There wasn't much social with it, really.
But there's still context around the derivative, the benefit that someone will derive
that someone saw
from consuming, which is energy. It's like this guy must have had exponential amounts of energy to want to go up to the stratosphere and jump out of it. And that doesn't mean that negates its effect of giving me energy when I want to stay up on a 24-hour gaming session. You know what I mean? It's got all the connotations, aspirational connotations, and I think that a lot of brands don't necessarily understand how to fuel their own consumer's identity and what role their brand plays within their lives. I know that we did a campaign called Vanish First the Internet, and actually laundry detergent is a really high interest product for mothers. Like, they actually think about this stuff, and if you can give them an alternative, they will buy an alternative laundry detergent. And it's just about disruptive. So tapping into their behaviour about, all right, so laundry detergent, by making their life easier, maybe we can disrupt them with some really interesting content that also demonstrates the efficacy. So we need to get that message across, but let's disrupt the whole before your eyes demonstration by doing it in a more interesting, socially centric way. And that's what we came up with. So it's I think it's more so fueling someone's identity. It's like, all right, these people are mothers. Let's not discount that, but let's actually give them something that they find entertaining, or is going to take 3 minutes out of their day that's they can celebrate, or something that helps them then inform their friends of a new product. So you give them that kudos of actually saying, here's a sample due to the fact that you are a valued member of our community. So there's all these, I think it comes back to your point, Ash, is that it's knowing which levers to pull, and through design, messaging, etc., what levers are actually going to generate the response that you want socially.
Awesome. It's 8:30. Like, we've got, we can probably have like 5-10 minutes question time if we have them. Do you have any questions? No one? You guys want to say anything?
We're either that awesome or we're really crap. I don't know.
No questions?
Sorry.
No, go for it.
You're talking about Red Bull and all those big brands, Apple, so obviously we go with interviewing or challenging the status quo, etc., etc. Do you feel that we've got so many brands who don't have that identity, who don't have that strong identity that drives everything in terms of all their communication platform, creatively and in terms of content?
I don't think you should discount what the job that Red Bull's done is. They've created that. They own that space. You look at V, who's a direct competitor of theirs, and they're still struggling to have a social identity and a content strategy that really picks up social traction. So I don't think I think that they recognise the attributes of their product, and they really drove that in a way that was relevant to their audience and with content that appeals. And I just, there's other more. I'm trying to think of stuff that pops up to my news feed that interests me. I don't know. I just, people see it as a systematic approach that Red Bull's taken, which it's not. They've just really, really done well to define their brand and to define it well and own a space within their target audience that appeals to their target audience.
It does help having a brand that has a very strong, single-minded, global kind of single-minded value.
And I think Red Bull is a content company now, not a drink company.
But Ben and Jerry is a content company in the same way.
Well,
no.
But I'd say it's more than it helps. I mean, there will be some rare exceptions, but in most instances, I think the social is more often than not a mirror to the equity that the brand has outside of that environment. So if basically people aren't really that engaged or don't love your brand that much before you went in social, well, they're probably not going to do it in social. And it's going to be, especially for a very big brand, pretty fucking hard to turn that around in social, because the scale of the beast isn't enough, because no one likes you enough to get the numbers that you need on there to start changing their perceptions around it. And so therefore you've got to change their perceptions elsewhere before you can get them to work. And and we've made mistakes to that effect. I think trying to launch a brand through social, hard work, really, really hard work, because you're trying to create equity in an environment that tends to be responsive to equity elsewhere. So you've got to build it there, and then you can start to get it to propagate and grow and gain that kind of conversation in that environment.
What did you launch through social? Beer brand?
It was booze brand. Yeah, didn't work.
But to an extent, I think that should be, again, the levers that you pull. So the attributes that you attach to your communications. is if you actually are a boring brand, that you should strive to be more entertaining with communications.
Great Coupon, which is Chris Porter's looking after that. That's a mustard.
Yeah.
And they've done amazing stuff with making their Facebook or their social about being in an elite group. They've actually turned mustard into something that's interesting. They're very creative kind of thought there. You can see that's actually being born out of the creative team versus a social team there.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of like Oreo. I mean, Oreo's a quite fun brand, but yeah,
There's a market or something like that. It's like insurance.
Yeah.
It's like meerkat jumping around.
Yeah, Geico's got a lizard. They've just no one wants to talk about insurance, but everyone loves lizards. So there's the baby talking Evian, dancing babies. Like, just you've got nothing. Water's water. Let's whack some babies in there.
What was that? I don't know whenever anybody's seen the Geico Makembe one.
Yep.
Where he's this really deep voice. He's an NBA player, but he was just like, you'd be happy.
How happy are you? As happy as
I think that's where creative really comes to the fore, and that's what creative has always served that purpose, is actually creating intangible interest and equity in a brand that's probably really, really fucking boring.
So social is a good way or even digital is a good way where you can test these type of things. So like, let's think laterally about our brand. So let's say Geico, it's like, rather than investing in the lizard, or the gecko, Geico gecko, in TV, let's test it in digital first and see the response, and then we can roll it out. Like, you can test and learn quite easily. Like you said, throw something out, doesn't work, bring it back in and we'll fix it up. But yeah, you can test and learn digital a lot more. But there's all the brands you kind of think of, even Burger King, they don't talk about burgers that much. It's in the US, it's the Burger King himself. So a lot of brands are actually kind of personifying themselves, or at least thinking laterally. And we should be, sometimes you can do that in social. Well, Optus is animals. I'd love it if the animals spoke on the social page versus Optus. It'd be great. Hey, it's the giraffe here. I haven't been in an ad for like ages. My neck hurts. Like my hand's free, whatever. But I think that's where I think so you have a lot more fun. Like, we have the most fun with Buffalo Bill because we just reply to everything as Buffalo Bill. Why isn't there a Buffalo Jill? Oh, there is, but I don't really tie down to one lady. We have a lot of fun with that because that's his character. It's very easy. It's a lot harder to do that for Cornetto, which doesn't really have a character to it.
Yeah.
It was too hot, she melted.
All right, so we'll end it there. I think it's quarter to 10 to 9. Unless there's any burning questions, I don't think there is.
Well, so it's pretty interesting. It seems like to me, two of the big things, in terms of what do we want from clients when it comes to social media. The two big things that come through really loud and clear from tonight is the trust. We want them to trust our expertise, and our ability to do what agencies are paid to do. And the second is we want money in order to have the freedom to execute that. Essentially though, that goes across any of the tools in our trade, right? Whether it be a TV ad, whether it be a press ad, whether it be radio. The fundamentals to us doing good work for them, not to give them an ROI, is we need their trust, and we need an appropriate level of budget to execute it somehow. So that's really what we want from them, right? The exact same things that any good agency-client relationship has.
Yep. Trust will give you better creative because they trust you to take more risks, and more money will let you actually execute those things. I think the reason for social, because it's so new and it has a lot of focus, the trust isn't there. There isn't years of equity built up. Like when I run a TV ad and my product's sold, it obviously works. So a social, we can't prove it. So we need more research, or at least more data to say that this actually works. Or if it doesn't, then great, we can move on to something else that does work.
Or relationships to get the first one over the line, so we can go from there.
Yeah. But I'll make that fake report for everyone to share. Just tell me what stats you need.
What brand?
I'll make a good looking. Coca-Cola in China just released this thing, blah blah blah, and it sold 100%. You go, awesome.
Awesome. We'll leave it there. Just on the next event, it's going to be about a month away. We're going to tackle a question that's come up, or that's been asked of me as a topic for this forum for the last, I think, 3 events, which is having a crack at establishing social ROI. So we're going to have 4 speakers who are game enough to actually stand up and answer those questions. I'll be one of them, and there's going to be 3 others. We're going to have someone else moderate it, which is Roden. But before that, I just want to thank Guel, Luke, and Ash for taking their time out to do this tonight. Hopefully it's been helpful for you guys. Thanks for coming along, and we'll see you at the next one.